Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Brian Van Hook, and I'm Regional Director of the Florida Small Business Development Center at FIU. We're going to give it a minute or two for everybody to come in. While you're coming in, there's going to be a poll that's going to pop up. Please take a minute to fill out the poll because that helps us to know who we're talking to and kind of what's your business and your organization. It also helps us to make sure that we're putting in content that's relevant to you. But we'll give it like another minute or two. But this is the webinar for management controls, what, how, why, and how. And we have a really great presenter, Ricardo Newark, that's gonna be presenting for you today. And I think we can go ahead and get started. I know we're gonna have some more folks streaming in. But as I mentioned, my name is Brian Van Hook. I'm with the Florida Small Business Development Center at FIU. We have a great team of 26 business consultants, both in Miami-Dade County and also the Keys. And we're here to help you start and grow your business. So if you're in the Miami-Dade County or the Keys, we're your local small business development center. And we have experienced consultants such as Ricardo that can help you with your business.
This is a test of.
Sorry about that, guys. FIU is having an alert. But we have a great team of consultants such as Ricardo that can help you at no cost. And so we'll put in the chat some more information on how to register and how to find more about the center. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Ricardo so that he can start the presentation. And please put in the chat like who you are, what's your business. And then towards the end, you can put in the Q&A any questions that you have for Ricardo. And this particular webinar, we always have really good questions for Ricardo. So please put in some ones that we can stump him. Give me your toughest questions. Don't give him easy stuff. And with that, I'll turn it to Ricardo.
Thank you. A technical question. I have the survey on my screen. And given I cannot submit, I cannot get rid of it. Any suggestion?
You can just click the X at the top, the little X. If you're an attendee, you can fill it out. But for you,
I'm not, so I don't see the X here.
Look up in the upper right corner.
No. Is there any way that can be removed or not? Let me just go back. It says host and panelists can vote. Okay. There's no way I can.
Did you get it out? Yeah, look at the top, Ricardo. Because it was on mine too, and I clicked it. Should be like the upper left or the upper right.
There's nothing there. Then if I get out and come back, or there's no way there's nothing you can do to get rid of that, right? Because I cannot submit, I cannot close.
You can't minimize it?
Yeah. Just in the middle of my screen, unfortunately.
Are you using a Mac?
Yeah, now it disappeared. All right.
Okay, there you go.
Okay,
Thanks to Sharef for helping.
Okay.
So there we go. So now the pressure's on. Now you got to do a great presentation. Now that you have no excuses.
Very good. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our management controlled webinar. What we'll try to address here is a subject that's extremely important. And this is one of those that not very glamorous, but when it's not there, the pain is very hard. So this is something you notice when it's not there. And if it's there, fortunately, or hopefully, you will not even know that you have the situation under control. But if you don't, the problem is gonna pop up everywhere. I'm gonna be focusing on some key elements because the subject is very wide and covers multiple areas. And I'll be using certain nomenclature, but if you look at the publications on the subject, you might find other words, other nomenclature that address the same concept, but some authors use different words. And the other thing that I'll try to provide a more generic view. Once you drill for specific industries, then the specifics might be different. But I expect that by the end of the webinar, we have a good sense of how to go about implementing controls for your companies. So let me see here. A second, trying to move the my screen. No, it's not trying, not moving.
You push the right arrow, it won't go?
Yeah, I don't. It was working before. Just excuse me, give me a second.
Yeah, maybe stop share and then share again.
Yeah, I think I have to do that. I don't know what it is. No, I don't know if somebody at FIU did something with this that, no?
No, I think it's on your max end, basically in terms of share.
But it was working okay. Now it's that this, the
There
here.
you go.
No, but only one move. Is someone, I know someone taking over because now it moved one slide.
Mm-mm.
Uh,
No, we don't
okay.
have control of it. That's you sharing the screen.
Okay, now, so as we're here, this is a brief summary of my bio, and just give you a sense for, I have some experience on the subject, and I'm currently, as Brian said, part of the team that's working at the SBDC. And I need to do something here. Just give me a second, because I'm not getting the slides to move. So I don't know if I have to get out and come back in. I can't imagine anything else. It was working before.
Yeah. I think just go out and come back in. Just stop sharing and then put it back in.
No, I already stopped sharing. I might have to get out and come back.
Yeah, if you want to. I mean, there's
Yeah.
everybody's familiar with all the Zoom, so sometimes there's technical issues. So what do you need to do? Log out and log back in?
Yeah, I'll do that. See if it works.
Okay. Everybody just bear with us for a minute, please. While we're waiting, that gives you a chance, put it who you are in the chat so we can hear from you. More about your business. Thanks to everybody that's put in their information. So I see we have folks in the Florida Keys. We have folks from North Miami. We have folks from, and then Charette was asking if we will receive a recording of this or be given the slides. We will send you the recording of the webinar afterwards so that you can watch it kind of on your own time. It'll be posted up to our YouTube page. And follow up with Brianna if you need any additional information after the webinar. And I see Victor said he's in Boca Raton. Okay, so here's Ricardo, he's back. And hi Juan, welcome. Thanks for signing in from Miami. Okay. So Ricardo, we can see we see the emails. And welcome to Warren. Congratulations on being in business for 54 years. That's awesome. Yeah, I think you're on mute, Ricardo. Oh, 67 years. Congratulations, Warren. 67, founded in 1954. Yeah, we can see Ricardo. So you're pulling up. Okay, so there you go. And then you're on mute.
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yeah, there we go. We can see the slides. We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, don't know what happened, was working before. Okay, so let's start first with try to define what is control. Control is basically measuring certain key indicators to ensure they meet standards and taking timely corrective action where they don't. So let me emphasize some key elements here. Only key indicators, you will see later, not everything can be measured or should be measured. So that's why we need to previously define what are the key indicators in our case. The other element is the information that you need to measure the key indicators. What information we need to gather. Once we gather the information, what are the standards we use for comparison to determine whether really the indicator is under control or not? And if it's not, what are the corrective actions to be taken if indicators don't meet those standards? So this is an attempt to define what are we trying to do. Okay, so I'm getting my trouble again. Let's see here. Okay, so let's address the control process. As we said before, we need to establish standards, measure results, compare with standards, analyze the cause of deviation, and take corrective actions. So to establish standards, we need to determine what our objectives. We're gonna focus, we're gonna concentrate on what is relevant for our business. What are the objectives of our business, and which are the key indicators that we're gonna measure, and which are the standards we're trying to match. We need to measure the actual results to see how are we doing, are we achieving those goals or not? And to answer that question, we're gonna compare the actual result we just measured with the standards we previously established. That will give us the answer, we're achieving our objectives or not. If we don't, we need to analyze the cause of deviations. If we are failing to meet our objectives, why are we failing? What's the reason behind it? And that's the richest part of the process, the investigation of why are we missing the goals. And once you understand that, we need then to take corrective actions. What can we change to achieve our objectives if we're missing them? So going back to the same steps we measured before, establish standards for the key elements, measure the results for the same elements, compare both. If there's a deviation, analyze what's causing the deviation. And once you know what's causing it, what can we do to fix it? So key indicators is the first step. We can't measure everything. That will be too costly and probably will dilute the effort, and not everything will be so relevant. So need to set priorities. What are the elements critical to the business? What is really important here? And as I said before, whether you're in manufacturing business or a service business is different. If you're in different industry like healthcare or banking, is also different. If you're a startup, a small company, or a large company, it's also different. So the beauty of this is you need to look at your own business and ask the question, which is critical for me to succeed? And those are the elements we're gonna focus. Then the next question we need to answer is what can be reasonably measured? What's the information needed? First, if it cannot be measured, then why bother? I mean, we cannot put an elusive goal that is not measurable because that will not help us. So first, once you know what's critical, make sure it's something measurable. And then you need to determine the information needs, because might be something important and measurable, but the cost of gathering the information might not be worth the effort. So you have several considerations in terms of setting which are the parameters you're going to measure, which are those key indicators. Have to be relevant, has to be a priority for the business, should be measurable, and the information needed to measure them should not be so costly that doesn't warrant the effort. And once you measure and you get the deviations and you try to take corrective actions, the question you need to answer, what corrective actions can the business manage? It doesn't help at all if you cannot manage them. If you're saying that, well, what's hurting me is that the economy in the country is not growing fast enough. Well, that's true, but there's not much you can do to manage that. Now, if you say I have inefficiencies in my production process, or I'm not selling enough, or I cannot hire enough people, or too many people are leaving the business, or my profitability is not good enough, my costs are too high, or my prices are too low, then those things are things you can manage. And those are the things when you should concentrate and focus. In general, the key areas of control, I divided them in 3 areas. And again, as I said before, depending on the literature, you can see different approaches. One is government regulations. These are areas where you need to be in compliance. You need to control how well are you fulfilling the government regulations. Then you have internal processes. You need to ensure that your internal process is under control. Your billing, your collections, your payroll, everything you do inside your business needs to follow certain standards, certain approaches, and those processes need to be controlled. And the third big one is the business performance, whether you call it sales, profit, growth, cash flow. Within that scope are the key elements you need to control. So you need to make sure, I summarize with what the government forces you to do, what internally you do to drive your business, and with the results of your business. Let's start first with government regulations. And you can imagine this is a very large area. I just put some few examples. There are codes, civil codes, commercial codes, criminal codes. And again, depending what business you're in, they are more or less specific, more or less relevant. The government has accounting and reporting standards. Particularly if you're a public company, is very precise what you can and cannot do when you prepare your accounting records. If you go to a bank, the bank will want to make sure that the financial statements you present are following the accepted accounting principles, even if you're a small company. There are some tax regulations. Unfortunately, you need to pay taxes, and there are direct taxes, indirect taxes of many sorts. Health and safety, depending on the company you are, there's something called OSHA that determines how the environment within the company, the safety protocols for your employees. And again, if you're in a manufacturing operation, this probably might be more relevant than if you're a pure service organization. Environmental, you need to fulfill requirements to make sure you don't pollute the environment. And depending on where your business is located, what's your industry, these things changes. There are labor regulations, whether it's be the minimum salary or how you hire and how you fire people, how you relate to people. There are regulations that you need to follow. You might have some flexibility within those regulations, but you need to know what they are. There are some discrimination regulations. I mean, you might be liable even if you understand what you're doing for some discrimination liability, whether it be by color, race, religion. You need to understand the regulation to make sure you don't run afoul of them. There are some privacy regulations. You might maybe unwillingly make public some private information you get from your clients. You need to understand what those requirements are. And this, you have sexual harassment, it's another consideration, again, depending on the size of the company and the composition of your labor force, might be more or less relevant, but it's always present. So these are some examples of things that you need to know. So usually when you start a small business, this is the last thing you consider. But as I said before, if you run a full of any of them, the cost can be very significant. And you need to understand what it is that you're supposed to do. And many times you have to resort to outside help to guide you through this process. Then the internal process is something that probably you heard about. It's called compliance. It's the way you do the accounting, the way you handle your human resources function, your cash disbursement, your cybersecurity, the way you purchase and you contract, your health and safety environment. So within this compliance is following, as I said before, some rules and regulations, sometimes established by the government, sometimes established by a board. Make sure that you have a process in place to ensure you follow those regulations. You need to have balances inside the organization between who buys, who pays, who makes a decision, who makes other. When you look at cash disbursement, cash is a very fungible asset. You need to make sure that there are certain processes to authorize disbursement, and not anybody can go to the cash and just write a check. Cybersecurity becoming more and more of an issue these days, and certain things you can do, again, depending on the size of your company, might be more or less relevant, but it's always critical when you hear a problem like that. The way you purchase and you contract, do you search for alternative vendors? Do you try to call for bids? How do you compare them? How do you, when you write a contract with a vendor, do you get an attorney to look at that contract to make sure you cover your bases, that you prevent yourself from any potential serious liability? Health, safety, environment. Are you providing a healthy environment? Are you make sure you're not creating circumstances you might be open to a lawsuit from an employee because of something you willingly or unwillingly did? So this compliance is something that you look inside the company. As before, when we're looking at governance was outside the company, many things you can control, you just need to obey. Here in compliance, you have flexibility to ensure that your internal operations are under control. And the last one we talked about was business performance. This is what really lets you know, is my business moving along the way I want in terms of sales, expenses, profits, cash flow, production, quality, personnel turnover, customer satisfaction, inventory, debt. And again, you need to choose among these or maybe others, what is most important for your business. If you're a small business starting to grow, the sales is probably a very key indicator, but you need to control your expenses. You need to measure them. The reason is you want to make profits. If you don't make profits, you get into deep trouble in terms of not only keeping the business, but even worse when you grow the business. You need to look at your cash flow. You might have very significant sales, very profitable, but depending on what your terms are for collections and for payables, you might run into serious cash flow problem. You might have a profitable company, have no money to grow the business. So these are things usually very critical things that you need to measure. Usually sales, expenses, profit, and cash flow are universally critical to most businesses. Then if you're in a production business, how many units are you producing? Are these in line with your expectation? Is critical, is the quality good enough? And this is true whether you produce or you buy. You have significant personnel turnover. I mean, you are incurring high training costs because people move and you cannot keep them. Is you have a healthy environment? Are your customers satisfied? You're getting information to measure if your customers are satisfied. Is your inventory level appropriate? Inventory is a place where a lot of cash can be parked, and many times it's not a useful way of using your cash. Are your debt levels manageable? So we need to determine, as I said before, which of these are critical, which ones can you measure. In this case, most of these can be measured. How costly it is to measure them, and that's something that will depend on your business. And once you do that, you pick up those that you say, I'm going to focus on this because this is what will determine if my business is moving along the way it should. Now, we already determined how the key parameters we're going to measure, right? And we have those either from the government, internal, or business performance. Now, which are the tools that I have to measure those? A key one is financial statements. Unfortunately, we come across many of our clients who do not have a good handle on financial statements. And in those cases, they are managing in the dark. Financial statements are basically what's called a profit and loss, a balance sheet, and cash flow statements that address many of the things we were talking about before. The financial statement will show your sales, your expenses, your profit, your cash, your inventory, your debt. So having relevant and reliable financial statements is probably one of the key pillars of any healthy business. Sales records. I often tell my clients that keeping detailed records of your sales, see who are your clients, do they come back, how much do they buy, where they located, provides a wealth of information to drive your business. So having good sales records is a measurement tool that will tell you a lot about how are you doing. Accounting audits, as we said before, are your internal processes in compliance? Are your human resources records in place? If you're a large enough company that you're subject to visit by government entities, having proper records of all your employees is a crucial requirement. Personal interactions, sometimes just talking with people, getting some qualitative feedback will give you a sense for, are people happy? They see a problem? They can provide you very valuable feedback about the internal workings of the organization and even the reaction of customers if they're in contact with them. Production output, if you have a manufacturing operation. Physical inventories, if you carry inventory, it's important regularly to do a physical measurement to make sure that the inventory on your books is the same inventory you have in your warehouse. So these are some examples of the measurement tools. So we have the indicators, we know how to measure them. Now that we measure them, we need to compare this with something to know, are we under control or we're not? So which are the standards? You can set your own objectives. I have a sales objective, a profit objective, a growth rate objective, a cash flow objective. So if you don't know where you're going, it's very hard to get there. So very important for the business, no matter the size, to decide what are you shooting for. Many businesses should have some kind of plans. And again, the larger the business, the most crucial this is. And the plans is probably a projection of where your business is gonna be next month or next year, or depending on the case, that the following years. But you need to plan ahead to know in advance what you need to get there. You might have some projections. You look at the past history, and based on what happened in the past, you project what you expect in the future. It could be just expectations. You might want to say, I want to grow 20% a year, or I want to become a $10 million company in 3 years. Whatever it is, the way you get there, you need to have some reference, some standard saying, in order to know if I'm succeeding, I need to have an element of comparison to say, if I'm hitting that standard, I'm doing okay. If I'm not doing okay. So get the key indicators, put in place the tools to measure them, and then have references to compare the actual number to your expectation, your objective, your plan or projection, to know if you're at the right place or you're not. So if you are, that's great. You're doing a great job. If you're not, the next step is you need to analyze the source of the deviations. A deviation means when I measure the actual results, I compare them with my standards of reference and I'm off. So something that is helpful is to separate the potential source of deviation into two big categories. It's a system problem and operations problem. A system problem means that it's something that's going to repeat itself. It's not something that happened once. It means that there's some underlying systemic issue that you need to resolve, because if not, you're always going to have deviations and you're never going to hit your standards. Some examples are realistic objectives. If your objectives are unrealistic for your situation, then you're always going to miss them. You have the right strategy in place. Again, if you put in place a lot of actions, but the strategy is not there, there's no underlying link among the actions, you're probably never going to succeed. Are you allocating resources properly? If you have a function within your group and you give somebody a demanding sales target and you don't allocate sales resources, you're probably going to miss it. So it's your resource allocation process in place. Infrastructure capacity. If you're a production organization and you don't have the machinery in place or the space or the employees to satisfy your production expectations, you have a capacity issue that will generate deviations over and over again. Organization alignment, and this is very important, is everybody pushing in the same direction. Are we organized in such a way that everybody has the same incentives? Does everybody know what we're trying to achieve? Is everybody translating the overall company goals into their own personal goals? Communication. Are you communicating to the organization what you want to do? Are you communicating to the organization what's going wrong? Are you communicating what's going right? Are you communicating the strategy? So these are some elements of what could be systemic problems. And then you have operations problem. That is something that is maybe more specific and something you can act on more immediately. One is management direction. If you're not providing the proper direction, people don't know what to do, or people misunderstand what they're supposed to do, or they don't know what they're going to do. So for the management of the key element is, once the strategy is in place and the plans are in place, communicate that through management direction to everybody who's on the organization. Do you have enough material availability? Is the cost viable for your prices? That's a particular issue today with some of the supply chain constraints. Getting the material on time at the right cost is becoming more of a challenge. But if you have your prices set and you cannot increase them, you need to make sure that your cost is such that you can be profitable. Do you have the available headcount? And again, might be an issue today, though there are still a lot of people looking for jobs. Might be a mismatch between what you need and what's available, and the labor cost might be going up. But if you have the right people to develop the actions that you need to achieve your goals, it's going to be a big issue. If the people you have capable, are their cost reasonable? Are they being properly trained? Is your equipment functioning right? If you have the equipment and you cannot afford the maintenance and the equipment is breaking down constantly, then that is a serious operations problem. And then information, is the information flowing properly? Do you have information systems in place that allows people to get the information they need? So this is some of the questions you need to ask. Once you measure the key elements, you compare them with the standard, and you find a deviation, these are the questions you need to check to define where is the problem, what's the source of the problem. And finally, once you get answers to this process, and this is a very rich process, then you need to take corrective actions. And that will depend on your conclusions from the previous slide. So some examples: organization. Do I have the right organization structure? Do I organize along the proper functions? Do I have the right individual? Do I have the appropriate number of employees? Are they properly trained? Are they properly motivated? Do they properly inform about what the company wants to do? So again, these are elements that very often generate shortfalls. So understanding the organization you have now is appropriate to deliver your goals is one of the corrective actions if your analysis of deviation indicates that there's a problem there. Your strategy, if your strategy is not in place, reassess it. The strategy might change over time. The market condition change, your personal situation changes, there may be new competitors, there might be a pandemic. So strategy has to be constantly reassessed and if necessary, changed. Management direction, are people getting your message appropriately? Do they know what to do? Is it clear? Do they understand it? Do they have the freedom to come to you or whoever is the manager and say, listen, I don't understand, clarify this for me? About company culture, the boss usually, or the owner or the CEO has a certain culture in mind. That is not always shared by the whole organization. So it's at the top level responsibility to instill that culture in the organization. So even there are certain things that are not totally or clearly defined, understanding the culture many times gives you the answer to some questions that might not be easily measured. Is your pricing right? As we said before, is your cost changing, or is your competitive situation changing? Can you afford higher pricing? Are you losing sales because your price is too high? Are you losing money because your price is too low? Key element, pricing is one of the key drivers of the success of your company. Sourcing, where are you sourcing? Today, we have several issues sourcing from many countries. You have the flexibility to switch sourcing from one country to another, if that's what's needed to keep your supply chain moving. Transaction terms and conditions. Are you negotiating properly with your clients? Are your payment terms appropriate for your cash flow? Are you negotiating properly with your vendors? Do they give you some payment terms from them for you to pay them that fits what you're doing? Do you have contracts that maybe need to be reassessed because you came across issues raised due to transaction terms and conditions that were not appropriate to your business? Do you have the proper headcount? You have too many? You don't have enough? You have the proper quality, the proper training? Are your salaries appropriate? Are you in line with the market? Are you competitive? Are you losing people? Are you paying too much? So looking at what people are doing and looking at the rest of the market gives you an answer. People's behavior. Are people motivated? Do they have the best interest of the company at heart when they act? It's something that can be done in that regard. And I also mentioned internal processes. If you don't have the proper checks and balances, if your internal process is disjointed, if your accounting doesn't follow the proper direction, these are key issues that might need correction. So these are the corrective actions. These are some of the examples of the corrective actions that you need to take. So again, I repeat the process. You set the key elements, the key considerations, the key things you want to measure. You put the tools in place to measure them. You measure them. Then you set the standards and against which you're going to compare them. You do the comparison, and if there's a deviation, you do an analysis to understand the cause of the deviation. Once you know the cause of the deviation, you take corrective actions to fix them, and you launch another cycle. This is an evergreen process, but it's monthly, quarterly, daily, weekly. Constantly, you need to measure corrective necessary or keep going if it's good. And maybe you might reassess goals or reassess which are the key parameters you want to measure. So in summary, these are the key takeaways I hope you'll get from this webinar. Control to identify problems on a timely basis. If you don't do this on a timely basis, it's too bad. Once the problem pops up, it's too late. So that's the most significant message you need to get here. It's issue with control is when it's not there. When it is there, you don't see it. When it's not there, it can really come crashing down on you. There's another consideration of tone at the top. The top of the organization sets the direction, sets the behavior, sets the culture. If the top of the organization provides the message that we want to have the operation under control, people react. People will not cut corners. If the message at the top is, listen, I want you to achieve your goals, I don't care how, that message will get out and you will find yourself in a loss of control situation that can become very damning for the business. You need an awareness of external regulations. You don't need to know them all. You need to be aware of which are the key ones. And when necessary, you need to contact an expert on those that are most relevant to your business to learn what you need to do to live up to them. Develop robust internal processes. Make sure there are checks and balances, that when people write contracts, when people find ways to hire employees, when you get new vendors, that there's a process that makes sure that all is in line with a control environment. You need to define your objectives and associated performance indicators. As I said before, you cannot measure everything. You need to define what is more significant, most important, and in particular, as it relates to the performance of your business. You need to know how you tell if your business is going where you want it to be or not. And that's what these performance indicators mean. You need information in place to measure compliance. If you don't measure it, you don't know where it is. And one of the issues with the small business that we find very often, information is not there because it's perceived as too expensive or too complicated, or there's not enough time to do it. But if there's no proper information to measure these key indicators, you don't know where you are, you don't know if you're deviating or not, and you're just rumbling, and who knows where you're going to end up. Once you have the information, analyze the deviations. That's a very rich process. I mean, be open, be honest with yourself. What is going on? What am I doing wrong? What is somebody else doing wrong? Or not necessarily somebody doing wrong, but maybe something changing the environment, in the economy, in the competition, that requires something to change. Because and how do you know that? Because you're not hitting your standards. And once you analyze the deviations, you need to deploy the corrective actions. If you don't deploy the corrective actions, you're stuck where you are. So the process needs to be completed and restarted. Starts with determining what you want to control, and then ends up with taking corrective actions to address those key elements that are not under control, to make sure in the next cycle they will become under control. So that's a summary of the message. So be happy to address any questions that you may have.
Yeah, and Ricardo, while they're posting in the Q&A, so you gave them a lot of good information. What would be like one takeaway that they could go do today? If there was something that they could kind of get started today in terms of the business and implementing some of the information, what would you recommend to get started? I think identifying some of the keep KPIs or some of the other metrics.
Exactly. I think it's all part of a cycle, but the key message here, identify the critical KPIs, measure them, make sure you have an objective against which you compare them. And if they don't match, find out why, and then do something about it.
But I think also the one issue a lot of small businesses have too is they've had the same metrics for such a long time, and businesses change, markets change, customers change. So isn't it also keeping up with the KPIs and making sure that those are metrics that are kind of good for your business long term?
Absolutely, absolutely right. At a certain point in time, as I mentioned, maybe growing the business might be the key element to determine your success. At some other point in time could be profit, some other point might be cash flow. So depending on the age of the business, the industry, the situation, the KPIs might change. There are some that probably gonna be there most of the time. I said before, sales, revenues, expenses, profit, cash is probably something gonna live with the business for a long time.
Okay, well, I don't see any, let me see, I do see a question. Maria snuck one in, so she's quick. Her question, this is from Maria, regarding salary. If an employee falls ill with COVID and goes into quarantine for 15 days or more, the company must pay them for those days. So I guess there's more of a comment than a question.
Yeah, well, that is part of your business cost, right? That might be true for employees affected by COVID, might be something, I mean, the power might go out because it was a hurricane and you still need to pay the bills or one of your clients goes bankrupt and doesn't pay their bills. So those are elements that will happen constantly with almost any business. And you need to, as I said before, if you keep a sharp eye on those key indicators and you can capture the deviation early enough, you hopefully will find a way to react and address the deviation with the corrective action.
Mm-hmm. And then Charette was asking, when taking over a business that is in trouble, how do you know what areas of the business to assess first?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't know if taking over a business means that you buy it. If you buy it, hopefully you do some due diligence in advance to know what the problems are. If you're just being hired to take over a business, I think that the scheme that we presented here is probably a good way to start. You measure what's relevant for this business. Look at the sales, look at the expenses, look at the profit, look at the cash, look where the business is. And now you are coming in and say, what do I want this business to be? Compare those two. And that will give you a lot of the answers you're looking for. You're gonna say, the sales are not good enough, or I'm selling a lot, but I'm losing money. So maybe my price is not good enough. Or maybe my cost is too high, I need to find another vendor. Or maybe I don't have enough people, or maybe my salaries are not enough. So the important thing is to have an organized, structured, analytical process to get those answers. And I believe the framework we presented here can go long ways in terms of giving you that support to answer your very important question.
Charette basically was talking about inheriting a business, like they have a business.
Okay.
Then Christy had a question. There are many regulators out there. Aside from industry regulators, are there any others to consider?
Well, you have industry regulators, and I presented a long list of government regulations that are not necessarily industry specifics, right? In terms of environment, in terms of labor, in terms of health and safety, in terms of discrimination. Some of these cut across all industries. So there are some industry regulations. There are some basic regulations that you need to follow. And depending on your business, the industry, whether production, your service, if you're a large organization or not, some might be more relevant than others, but there's a group of key regulations that any people doing business need to know about. And some of them might be determined by the federal government, some by the state government, some even by the city. Do you need a license to do your business? What hours can you be open? Is this that where I'm locating my business, is it a legal location to do this kind of business? And I'm providing a safe environment. So it's not just that the industry is very significant, but the network of regulations goes well beyond specific industries and cover the way we do business wherever we are and whatever we're doing.
Yeah, and like you said, you have regulators depending on the industry, and also every business needs to pay attention whether they have federal rules, whether they have state regulations and laws, where they have local regulations and laws. So you have a lot you have to pay attention to. And I don't see any other questions, Ricardo. So I think you kind of covered a lot of them. So we mentioned at the beginning that we will be posting a recording of the video to our YouTube page. So if you want to watch it on your own time, you can feel free to do that. Just thanks to everybody for participating. And if you have any questions, any other information, you can follow up with Brianna. And then we did have one final question, Ricardo, from Ray. He was asking, can you suggest a format or program to utilize to manage all of these different disciplines? An example, accounting, he uses QuickBooks, so he can generate the financial statements needed to measure. But many of the others are task and time driven. So what type of program can be used to keep everything in harmony?
Yeah, that's a good question. Depends on your company size and affordability. You probably are familiar with ERPs. Those are comprehensive information systems that integrate all the different areas of your company. That it's ideal. There are some of them that are appropriate for small businesses, but again, might be too expensive depending on company size. There are CRMs that are systems addressing particularly the marketing side. So, but again, the system aspect is just the way of implementing. But I want to emphasize the importance of what I call the tone at the top, and to pay attention to control. Something that you ask. If people at the top only ask about the performance and they don't convey clearly that the way that performance is achieved is important, they might deliver indirectly the wrong message. So once you have the things, if the business is small enough or too small, let's say, to implement an ERP, that's an overall information system, maybe it's the proper size to measure things manually. There's nothing wrong with doing manual using a spreadsheet. The important thing is to keep track of the key things, measure them, and compare them with something. And depending what you can afford, you can start doing on a piece of paper, on a spreadsheet, or get a fancier system that will give you all the answers in a more coordinated fashion.
Yeah, and I think Vanessa posted in the chat about Canvas or Canva. Also, there's Asana, there's Monday.com, there's a lot of other different systems that you can use related to tasks and operations. So that's it in terms of the questions, Ricardo. So great presentation, great questions from the attendees.
Very good. I appreciate everybody's participation. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning. Hope this was helpful. And as Brian said, you can always contact us, contact the SBDC at FIU, and we'll be happy to help you on this and many other subjects.
Yeah, and I think you saved it. You had a great presentation as always. So, and the content was good. So everybody forgets about any like technical bugs at the beginning. So just thanks to you for the presentation. Thanks to Brianna for organizing everything, and everybody feel free to follow up if we can help you in any way. All right, take care.
Bye now.